Picture this. You're at the top of your game. You've mastered your craft, honed your skills, and earned the respect of your peers. Yet, you continually have this feeling that perhaps you're not as good as everyone thinks you are. You doubt yourself, question your abilities, and think it is just a matter of time before everyone finds you out. You feel like an imposter. Welcome, my friends, to the infamous and incredibly annoying imposter syndrome. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at imposter syndrome and working through some ways to deal with it. So if you've ever felt like a fraud in your own success, if you've ever questioned your talents or second-guessed your achievements, stick around. So firstly, let's start with a definition of imposter syndrome, which is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. And I think it's important to define because I think there's a common misconception that imposter syndrome is more about doing something maybe scary for the first time and feeling a little bit like, how the hell have I wound up doing this thing? But that is not really imposter syndrome, because as you can see from that definition, imposter syndrome is more about where individuals doubt their achievements and have this persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud despite evidence of their competence and success. For instance, say you have to deliver some training at work to a group of people on some complex issue. The first time you go to give that training, it's likely that you will feel a bit apprehensive, a bit nervous, and probably a bit outside of your comfort zone. But that is not imposter syndrome. However, if you deliver that training 50 times, say, and it generally always goes well, and you do then have real competence on the topic, and then you go to deliver that training on the 51st time and still feel like a fraud and like you don't have a clue what you're talking about, that is imposter syndrome. And from this, I think we can actually see how horrible imposter syndrome can be. Because despite the fact that you might have worked really hard and gained experience and qualifications and achieved success that other people even can see, you yourself still do not feel enough and you feel like you never belong. So what can we do about it? Well, the first tool that I have that I think really helps is to realize that everyone has imposter syndrome. And this was really highlighted to me when I was working at my previous law firm, and I was talking to one of the senior partners of the firm about public speaking. And this guy was an unbelievable public speaker and seemed so confident and natural at it. But he told me that he gets super nervous before every speech that he gives and has, like me, thoughts of whether what he's saying is going to be any good or not. And listening to this and then understanding that everyone has these sorts of thoughts was a really liberating feeling for me and made me feel not so alone having these thoughts and not so worried about them. And in mindfulness, they teach you about the importance of noticing your thoughts, but not necessarily attaching any meaning or importance to them. And when it comes to imposter syndrome, I think having this awareness that everyone has it allows you to do just that with your thoughts in relation to imposter syndrome. In that you probably will still have the thoughts that you normally have and can't just immediately turn them off. But when you do have them, you can notice them for just what they are, just thoughts, and not attach any meaning to them. And doing that takes away the negative emotions and consequences of the thoughts themselves. The second thing I like to remember is that by definition, you are not an imposter unless you claim to be something that you are not. And so if you can just embrace your authentic self and not try to presume more knowledge than you actually have, you are not an imposter. And you should be able to be comfortable in your own skin. And a mindset shift that I think can really help with this is a concept of how you don't need to be a guru, you can just be a guide. And the idea is that a guru is someone who has extreme expertise and all the answers to something. And so if that is the standard that you think you always need to meet, the likelihood is that you probably will feel like an imposter. As even if you do have real qualifications and experience, you're probably not going to have guru-like status. However, you don't need to be a guru and instead can just be a guide, which is this idea of embracing more this attitude of hey, I'm just on this journey of life with you, and yeah, I do have some knowledge and expertise, but I definitely don't know everything, and I'm just gonna share the knowledge that I have with you, and I'm just gonna see how that resonates. So it's this more light-hearted type attitude, and by embracing this mindset, it should make it a lot easier for you to realize that you can just be yourself, and you don't need to have all of the answers to everything and be some extreme expert, but that you can still take confidence and pride in what you do know. The third thing to think about is comparing yourself to others, because in my view, another big cause of imposter syndrome is how, despite the fact that objectively we might be very good and skilled at something, inside we think we are rubbish because we start comparing ourselves to someone else. And without doubt, the person that you're gonna compare yourself to is gonna be the absolute best in whatever that thing may be, which undoubtedly is gonna leave you with feelings of inferiority. But such a comparison is unfair and unrealistic, as it fails to consider the unique journeys, challenges, and circumstances that shape each person's path. And in this context, comparison really is the thief of joy. And so instead of fixating on other people's accomplishments or a certain standard that you think you need to meet, focus inward and celebrate your own progress and accomplishments, and try to realize that everyone is on their own journey in life, but that your journey is the only one that you really need to focus on. And my final tool to combat imposter syndrome is to try to set realistic standards for yourselves. Because in my view, imposter syndrome is very closely linked to perfectionism, in that people with imposter syndrome often think that they are never enough and they always need to do more and are never allowed to make a mistake, and think that people will think less of them if they do, and have these unattainably high standards for themselves, which of course is going to lead to stress and self-doubt. And so the key here is to just try to give yourself a bit of a break and lower your standards slightly so that you can alleviate the pressure of feeling like you have to be this flawless human being. And by letting go of these unrealistic expectations of perfectionism, you should then be able to start to recognize your own successes and progress and cultivate confidence in your abilities. So there you go, some insight into imposter syndrome and some of the best things that I think can help to deal with it. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and if you found any of it useful, please do check out my previous upload here, and it would be great if you subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, I will see you in my next video.